Horror stories about neighbors are one of the most attractive and dramatic topics because everyone has neighbors, and sometimes those close people are the cause of unforgettable horror stories. Today, we will explore three horror stories about neighbors, each of which brings its own sense of insecurity and obsession. Are you brave enough to listen to all these stories? Story 1: The Secret in the Backyard. 5 years ago, my family moved to a quiet neighborhood. Right next door lived Mr. Charles, a man in his 50s. Everything was normal until a dreadful event happened. His 14-year-old son went missing without a trace. The police were notified, and it was all over the news, leaving everyone in the neighborhood shaken. Although we weren't close, my wife and I still tried to help Mr. Charles's family whenever needed. Years passed, and the family seemed to come to terms with the sad reality. However, their lives were never the same. His wife, Kathy, became quiet and withdrawn, while Mr. Charles always seemed anxious. Last week, Mr. Charles came over and asked to borrow a shovel. I handed it over without hesitation, thinking he needed it for gardening. About an hour later, I saw Mr. Charles digging a large hole in his backyard. Curious, I grabbed another shovel and went over to help. But as soon as I stepped into the yard, he quickly demanded that I leave, looking at me with a frightened expression. I found it odd, but I went back home and kept an eye on him from the window. At around 1:30 in the morning, I heard the sound of a shovel hitting the dirt. This time, I decided to sneak outside and see what he was up to. Peeking over the fence, I noticed a black garbage bag sticking out of the hole he was digging. Before I could make a move, Mr. Charles came back outside. The next morning, I noticed the hole was completely filled in, and his SUV was parked on the street instead of in the driveway. I couldn't be certain, but I kept wondering if it was his son's body in that bag. Perhaps he had dug it up to dispose of it somewhere else. After that night, Mr. Charles started avoiding me, and he never returned the shovel. It only made me more suspicious and scared, but to this day I still haven't told anyone about it. Story 2: The Troubled Neighbors. When I was 15, my family lived in a small neighborhood. We didn't interact much with our neighbors, but there was a family next door with two boys named Eric and Todd. One day, Todd invited my younger brother and me to go shoot BB guns by the river. Although I didn't feel entirely comfortable, I agreed, and we arranged to meet the following day. When we arrived, Todd and Eric suddenly revealed that the BB guns were actually real guns, and they began shooting at trees across the river. I immediately grabbed the gun from my brother's hands and decided to leave. But afterward, Todd and Eric kept bothering us. They threw rocks at our windows, and one night, Todd even sneaked into my room and threatened to kill my entire family if I told anyone about the guns. Their behavior grew increasingly strange until the day we moved. As the moving truck left, I felt like I had escaped from a nightmare. Even years later, I never shared the story with anyone. Story 3: The Strange Woman. After graduating from college, I moved to a small house in a not-so-nice area. Next door lived two women, an older lady around 60 and a younger woman with severe mental issues. The younger woman frequently had episodes where she screamed and pointed at me from their porch. One night, the noise from their house didn't stop. I went over and politely asked them to keep it down, but the older woman rudely slammed the door in my face. I thought it was over, but at 3 a.m., I woke up to strange noises downstairs. As I tried to go back to sleep, I saw the face of the younger woman staring at me from the edge of my bed. I screamed and ran out of the room. The police arrived and took her away, but from that day forward, the older woman would always glare at me whenever we crossed paths. I eventually decided to move out for my safety. These three stories illustrate frightening encounters with strange and dangerous neighbors. The takeaway is the importance of staying cautious and handling unusual situations wisely. If you sense danger, Don't hesitate to seek help from authorities and always prioritize your safety.